This is by far one of my favorite cards that I created. So it is actually a pinwheel card, and it folds down into an envelope. And we're going to need quite a bit of items for this. So we'll go through and let's set aside the items that we need. One of the items that we need to create the center of that piece is a piece of cardstock. You can use basic gray, smoky slate, anything that's kind of a subtle color that kind of matches in what we're using. If you want, you can also use a boho blue color. It is totally up to you. So I have a piece of a smoky slate that I'm going to be using for the center of this card. Now the wing parts, that's what I'm going to refer to these parts to, will be from the cardstock of boho blue. So I have a sheet of that here. I need to have that off to the side. There we go. There we go. I also need to have a couple of pieces of the card bases in there, and I will be cutting these apart. One of them is horizontal, which means we will be using some of this, and we need to have that reserved for the rest of it. The other part will be this nice, super cool looking gray one that we're going to use, and we're going to be cutting that in half, and that's going to become on some of the wings the full panel. I also want to get some of the items from the ephemera pack that have the corduroy ribbon pieces, and so I got a couple of those. A long one, I'm not sure if I'm going to use them all, but at least I have them available to me. I also looked at there and I saw one of the edges had this really kind of funky design like that, and I thought that would be really cool to use, and I'm going to be using that, and that came off the piece from this guy here. Again, I also have a very thin piece, which was an end piece. I'm going to try and cut this down and use it on parts of that. I have a sentiment, a thinking of you. And again, remember what we did with card number 3. I looked for the one that is French, that is small, so I can cut off the edges, so I can use the flagged ends. The ephemera pack of the circle of the skyline. And the last piece is this piece of skyline here itself, and I'm going to be stamping on that. So those are the pieces that I have. What I'm going to start with is actually that center post. And I'm going to need my trimmer. So I want to make sure it is 5.5 tall. And it's very important that you make sure that it's 5.5 tall, because it kind of looks a little bit the same. So I'm just going to double check. So 5.5 tall, yes, that is. And what I want to do is I'm going to cut at, not cut, I'm going to score. Make sure you got your score. And I'm going to score at every inch. So that's 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inch, and the last one is 4 inch. So I'm going to have those all scored at inch intervals. Okay. So you can see them fairly there. There they are. What I'm going to do is just fold it so it becomes a square. And this overlapping piece gives me enough space that I can use my tear and tape to close that up. And I'm going to be using tear and tape particularly on that because I want to make sure it is well secured. I'm going to peel that off, and again I'm going to make it into a square. And I'm going to carefully make sure the ends are together. And let's make sure those squares, the ends are together. So I'm going to carefully line it up. And there we go. So I can make it nice and flat like that. And I'm going to fold it over on itself just so it breaks in that shape and it's all nice and flat. Okay, so that makes that center post. Now if you need to, there's a little piece here. I can add a little glue dot if the glue didn't get all the way up there. And I think I will do that just to hold it together. I'm going to pop that in there like that, so I have that center piece. I need to make the wing part of this windmill part. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my piece of boho blue, okay? And what I want to do is I'm going to cut it to 1/2 inch tall. So there we go, 1/2 inch tall. But each part, instead of being 4 1/4 for each wing, so I'm just going to write here wing. So it's 5 1/2 tall by 3. Okay, and I need to do 4 of those. So I need to cut 4 of those 5 1/2 by 3 inches. First, I'm going to cut it at 5 1/2 to give it the height. There we go. And then I'm going to turn it, and I need to do 4 of them at 3 inches. So I may have to use a couple of pieces of cardstock. Let's see how many I can get out. 1, 2, 3, and this one is, oh my goodness, what we cut off is exactly 3 inches, so we go back to 5 1/2. And there are 4 pieces of the wings. Okay, so I got 4 pieces of the wings. Now, what I want to do is very careful on how you place the wings together. Okay, I'm going to be using tear and tape again because it is nice and strong. And I'm going to be using a couple of rows of that. So I'm going to place one on. And I'm going to peel it off. And I'm going to place one wing on. And I'm going to put it as close, almost on top of that seam, but not quite. I want to get it nice and close. Make sure it's even on the bottom. And I have it on there. So I have that wing already on there. When you build this, just be very careful that you follow the same pattern. So that wing is on the square. I'm going to open it and lay it flat. Put another piece down. Follow the same pattern. Again, along the edge. Make sure it's flush on the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to turn it again. And adding some glue. Okay. Make sure you don't put it this way, because if you do, your card won't open. So you have to continue the same pattern. Again, open. Take your time doing this. And the last wing goes on. So there we go. We have it all the way around. There we go. Oops. Now if you need to add a couple of glue dots, I think I missed that spot on the glue. Just toss it in with a couple of glue dots. Just double check. Turn it over and just check all the way around. Okay. And that makes the base for your card. What we need to do next is decorate each of the wings. And what I wanted to do is I'm going to have kind of the same color pattern on each side. So I'm going to have a color pattern of gray on this, and on the opposite side, which is this side, it will also be gray. So I got gray on one side, skip it, gray on the other side. What we're going to be using is this long piece to start with. So if I just leave it like that, it is too large. So first of all, I need to take it down to 5 1/4, and I need to do that all the way across. So let's pull this out and cut it to 5 1/4. I'm actually going to just do that. And that's 5 1/4. Now I know each of these wide panels is 3 inches. What I want to do is now cut the pieces for each wing. So if I have a panel on the wider side, it's going to be cut 2 3/4 by 5 1/4. If I'm going to have a panel on the smaller wing, it will be cut at 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I maximize as much of the panel as possible. Just wanted to put that on there like that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this piece here, because I want to use this image on the large panel side. So I'm going to make it 5 1/4, which I already did. So it's 5 1/4. But because I want to get this image, I'm turning it upside down, and I'm going to do it to 2 3/4. I'm going to move it over to 2 3/4. And that's the large panel size. So if I take this, bring this back in, it will fit right on top. Okay, so that is 2 3/4. But I need to have something on this side too. And I'm going to take this over, and it goes to 1 3/4. Okay, so I can leave this either the piece in here, or I can take another piece of card base and cut that. But I think I'm just going to try this. Let's see how that goes. Okay, I can see kind of the line. Let's see. Let's place it in and see how that goes. Okay, I can place that in there, and I think it's okay. So I have those two on that side. Okay, now I need to do the exact same on the opposite side, but I'm going to be using, instead of that image, I'm going to be using something simple. And what I want to do, so actually I'm going to glue this down so that I can turn the card over. So I have those glued on, and all I need to do is flip it over, because I'm going to be using the other side. This one panel I will be creating with this one sheet that I had. Again, we need to cut it to 2 3/4. And what happens is this piece is, I can write something on there if I want. I can always stamp something before I glue it down, but this is the spot where my sentiment or my message is going to be, and I'm going to just place it down there. Now, you can always leave this portion of the cardstock the way it is, but I'm going to pull out another piece of card base that is right here, and I'm going to use it on that side, and I'm going to cut it to 3 1/4 by 5 1/4. So first of all, 1 3/4, I'm going to cut it, and I'm going to make it to 5 1/4 in height, and I'm going to glue that on there. Just like that. Okay, so the opposite sides are done now. There's one there and there's one there. I can do a sentiment. I'm going to fold it, and now I need again to finish up these parts, and I am going to bring in that piece of cardstock that had the landscape this way. This landscape is landscape. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this off here, and I'm going to break it up because I want to do it on this side here. Okay. So all I did was I cut that top portion off, and I want to use a piece on this side, so I'm going to cut a smaller piece, this like right here, through 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. But because it's not all the way down, even if I just put it like that, there's still a little bit. But that's okay. I can fix that in a minute. In the meantime, I want to place this on here. The other panel, I'm going to cut to 2 3/4 by 5 1/2. But I am not going to glue it on quite yet. Okay, so I have this panel here. I'm not going to glue it down because I want to do some stamping on here before I place it on the card. So I'm going to take this, and I'm going to take my pebbled path, and there was an image of the buildings, this one right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stamp the image of the building on here. Okay, try and line it up as best as I can and stamp it on. There we go. I'm going to take the little light parts, and I'm going to take a look to see where that lines up. And I want to see, there it goes, so right about there. And I stamp it on there. So when I place this on top, it's just like a little skyline. I can even move it up a little bit, but there we go. I'm going to glue this down, and I'm actually going to glue it down with dimensionals to give it a bit of height. There we go, I'm going to place it on there, and it will go over just a smidgen longer than the piece. I'm going to add this to my card base. I'm going to glue it down. Now you'll notice there's a big space right here. I'm going to put a sentiment there, so don't worry about that. Leave that for a little bit. We're going to glue that down. There we go. I'm going to work on this small panel. Remember, it was a little short on here, but there is an extra piece that I had cut off. And all I need to do is cut it to that width, which is 1 3/4. Let's glue that down. I'm going to eyeball it, try and get it as equal as I can, height-wise. There we go. And I'm going to glue this piece on top. Because they are exactly the same size, they should be flush with each other. So I'm going to leave that. Because there is kind of like a seam right there, what I want to do is I'm going to get a funky piece of that corrugated, or whatever it's called, piece here. I'm going to use a thin one, and this is for the ends, and I'm just going to snip it and make it even. I'm just tidying it up, cutting the little pieces. What I want to do is I'm going to cut it so it fits right on there, and it needs to be cut again to 1 3/4. I'm going to add that with a little bit of a glue dot because it's a small area and I want to get that glue on there. I'm going to make the glue dot into a small little ball. Place it on there. Get another one. I want to make sure that it sticks. I'm going to fold it over a little bit. There we go. And I'm just going to place it on top, right across that seam. So there's that one side. Like I said, I'm going to leave this. I'm going to have a sentiment there. Turn it. What I could do is I could always add something there if I want. We can do that in a minute. But I want to finish this last side. Remember, we cut apart that piece of card front, and then what I want to do is cut this to 2 3/4. There's going to be a piece on the bottom. Again, we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for the small one. There we go, 2 3/4. I have a little piece left over. I need to cut that to 2 3/4. And let's start building that up. There we go. Now again, we have that seam, and remember I had that funky piece. Look at that, I'm going to put that right on there, and I'm going to have my sentiment, which is somewhere. So I have my sentiment. Now this sentiment is a little long. I can cut the flag pieces off to make it fit, and that is what I'm going to do. Or I could just cut off one side and kind of have it off to one side. But first, let's glue down this funky piece right here. And I'm going to be placing the glue dots in the large areas. Before you glue it down, make sure that it's the right size. Oh, I forgot to put it to the right size. Remember, 2 3/4. There we go, 2 3/4. Right along that seam. I could actually just leave it the way it is, or I can add a sentiment. I'm not sure. It is totally up to you. I think I like that sitting on top. I'm going to cut off this one side of the flag to make it flush. And let's see how far it goes over. Place it over. I think I can get a little bit further. I think I have to do a little bit more. Remember, do small cuts until you're happy with what you got there. Oh, just a little bit more. Now I'm going to glue this down. There we go. Line it up. So just make sure it doesn't go over the edge. Very important. You don't want that to go over the edge when your card is closed. Okay. Oh, it looks like I need some more glue dots on the top. Or glue this guy down. Actually, what I'm going to do to hold that down is get a block. Just hold it down for a minute there. So I let that glue, the block sit on that glue just to hold it down a little bit. I have to finish up this piece here, and what I decided to do, instead of using another card base, I'm actually just going to use a piece of this envelope, and I'm going to cut that down to 1 3/4 by 5 1/4. So I have that cut down. I can just pop it on there, and it spans the whole area and looks really nice. Again, a little bit of glue. I'm not going to use a whole bunch of glue because this is the envelope and it is a little thinner paper, so I don't want it to have too much glue on it. Otherwise, it will look all buckly. I don't want that to happen. So I have that. Oops, there we go. And there's a spot I can write my sentiment. Oh, that's my part. Now I want to put a little sentiment up here. If you have any of those circle sentiments left over, that is a good spot to place it. Let's see if I have one. I may not have one because I do. I have one left. And I'm going to be placing that on there. But remember, we did that with the French. We're going to be cutting this. I'm going to glue that down. Oops. Put a little bit of glue on each side. They will never know this is a French piece. Trying to have it as evenly as possible across. Let's get some dimensionals. Make sure that is well glued down. I'm going to span the dimensional across those pieces just to make sure it stays where it should. Glue that down. I think that looks pretty cool. Now, if you want, oh, that one kind of looks like it's going to buckle a little, so I'm just going to trim this off just ever so slightly. Yeah, there we go. I think that looks really cool by itself, but if you want, oh dear. I'm thinking of you kind of buckled too, so Let's trim that off ever so slightly. There we go. I can leave the skyline just like that, or if you want, you can place this on here, but if you do, oops, here we go. My mistake. If you want to add this on here, just be aware that this circle is a little larger, so you'll have to cut off the sides if you want to add it on here. I did that on another card, and when I folded it, it kind of looked kind of off. So I really kind of just like this look by itself. I think it looks kind of nice. And kind of can't cut off too much more of this. So then it would be thinking of you, not quite the same. And there's a place for my sentiment, and I can add some embellishments. Maybe I'll do that over here. There we go. Do one over here. I don't know if I want to get too close in there. Just leave one like that. And there we go. Don't forget, you can decorate it with Wink to Stella, but it looks really, really nice. Just take your time. This is a great card. I love it.